ever get that feeling? That no matter what you do, it just doesn't make a difference. Like you're stuck in a system that's rigged.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's sadly the case for millions of people globally when it comes to elections.
And that's what we're diving into today.
It's unsettling.
Yeah, he really is.
The world of election rigging.
The tactics they use are so diverse.
It's crazy. And the consequences.
Far-reaching, to say the least.
So, to guide us through this, we have an interview with Brian Klaas.
Author of...
Co-author, actually.
Right, co-author, of course.
Of How to Rig an Election.
And he was on the American History Hit podcast.
Yeah, and he shared some really eye-opening insights.
I gotta say, I learned a lot just prepping for this.
You and me both.
Yeah.
But I think before we get into the really crazy stuff,
Yeah.
we should define what a free and fair election actually is.
You're right, it's a term we hear all the time, but what's it really mean?
Well, think about it this way. In contrast to, let's say, Saddam Hussein's Iraq,
Okay.
where there were no real choices,
A true democracy depends on competition.
where citizens have a real say in who governs them.
Exactly.
And, Klaas pointed out this kind of paradox. We're seeing more elections globally than ever,
Yeah.
but democracy itself seems to be declining.
Interesting.
It's a head-scratcher for sure.
He thinks it's because of this post-Cold War era.
Oh, interesting.
After the Soviet Union fell, there was this feeling like democracy had won.
Right.
So without a clear enemy,
People got complacent.
maybe,
Mm.
and more tolerant of democracy's flaws.
So it's like we let our guard down.
Yeah, and that's when things can start to go wrong.
And that brings us to one of the most surprising things I learned from the interview.
What's that?
Vote buying is incredibly common.
Is it?
Klaas said it happens in 2/3 of elections in Africa.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. And it makes sense when you think about it.
How so?
It's pretty cheap. It's direct.
Especially in areas where people are struggling financially.
Even a little bit of money can make a big difference.
Right. It can sway their vote.
And a Klaas even told this crazy story about a concert in Senegal.
A concert.
People were trading their opponent's ballot to get in.
Wow, talk about a captive audience.
Seriously. But, vote buying is really just the beginning.
Oh, it gets worse.
Sadly, yes.
How so?
Violence and intimidation.
Oh, no.
Klaas said over 1/3 of elections in Africa and Asia involve violence.
Against the opposition or their supporters?
Exactly.
That's awful.
It's scary. And Cheeseman, Klaas's co-author, has this term for it, shaking the matchbox.
Shaking the matchbox.
I know, it sounds weird, right?
Yeah, I didn't get it.
Well, it's from a story about Zimbabwe.
Okay.
During one election, there were reports of arson in neighborhoods that supported the opposition.
Wow, that's intense.
Right. And it caused international outrage.
So what happened next?
Well, the next election, they switched tactics.
And they stopped the arson?
Instead of violence, they sent people through the same neighborhoods,
Doing what?
just shaking matchboxes.
Oh, wow, that's menacing.
Right. We know where you live, kind of thing.
And things could get unpleasant.
It's a threat, but subtle.
Effective.
Exactly. And it shows how these riggers are constantly adapting.
It's like a game of cat and mouse.
They find new ways to stay ahead of the watchdogs.
Always trying to stay one step ahead.
And speaking of creative tactics,
What happened?
Klaas talked about this election in St. Petersburg, Russia, with a candidate named Oleg Sergey.
Oleg Sergey.
It's almost funny.
What happened?
2 other guys, also named Oleg Sergey.
Wait, seriously?
Yep, they were recruited to run against him,
So there were 3 Oleg Sergeys on the ballot.
causing mass confusion among voters.
Oh, can you imagine?
It's like something out of a comedy.
It's unbelievable.
But the implications are serious.
Yeah, people might not know who they're voting for.
Exactly. And you know what? In a recent Russian election, they took it even further.
How's that possible?
They found lookalikes of the opposition leader
No way.
and convinced them to legally change their names.
So, multiple identical candidates.
Yep. It's mind-boggling, the lengths they go to,
It really makes you wonder.
for sure. Okay, let's bring it back to the U.S. for a moment.
Okay.
And talk about gerrymandering.
Ah, gerrymandering, the manipulation of electoral boundaries.
A sophisticated way to rig the system.
And it's legal.
I always get confused by this.
What is it you find confusing?
The whole concept. Can you break it down for me?
Of course. The term itself comes from, well, it has a quirky origin.
Oh,
Elbridge Gerry, a governor of Massachusetts.
okay.
He approved this really weird district map.
What was weird about
It
it?
was shaped like a salamander,
A salamander.
hence gerrymander.
Ah, I get it. So what's the real problem with this?
It lets politicians choose their voters.
instead of the other way around.
Exactly. They manipulate those district boundaries,
Concentrate certain groups of voters.
guaranteeing their re-election or the election of someone from their party.
It's rigging the system from the inside.
Precisely.
Remember, Class said in 2016, the average win margin for House races was 37.1%.
Wow, that's huge.
It means those races weren't even close.
And that's a direct result of gerrymandering,
It's a problem on both sides, but worse with Republicans right now.
leading to a system that favors those already in power.
And weakens our democracy.
It's true, but it's not just happening here in the U.S., remember?
Right. And sometimes the tactics are like straight out of a spy movie.
Like what?
Disappearing ink.
Vanishing votes. Tell me more.
This was in the 2004 Ukrainian presidential election.
Oh, wow. A pivotal moment for Ukraine.
A tight race, really high stakes. Viktor Yushchenko,
Who was?
he was pro-Western, wanted democratic reforms.
And the other guy.
Viktor Yanukovych, he was seen as pro-Russia.
So where does the disappearing ink come in?
Well, in a region that was expected to heavily favor Yushchenko,
Okay.
voters used special pens at the polling stations.
Special how?
They were told the ink was permanent.
Uh-oh.
But after the election, a lot of that ink had vanished.
So their votes, they were literally erased.
Like something out of a movie.
Incredible.
It's a bold tactic.
And almost impossible to prove.
Right. So there were a lot of allegations of fraud.
What happened in the end?
The Supreme Court annulled the election and a new one was held.
Which Yushchenko won,
But it definitely damaged their political landscape,
showing how fragile democracy can be.
even with international observers.
Exactly.
It's incredible how people can be creative in protecting elections, but also in manipulating them.
True. And Klass talked about this 17-year decline in democracy globally.
And his book update suggests it's getting worse.
That's disheartening.
It is, but there's still reason for hope, according to Klass.
Really? What gives him hope?
The enduring power of people's desire for democracy.
People still want it.
They do, and he believes that yearning will win out in the end.
That's a good point.
And there are practical things we can do to protect elections.
Like what?
Well, in some countries, they're using simple solutions.
Like?
Zip ties with barcodes to secure ballot boxes.
Ah, so they can't be tampered with?
Exactly.
Smart.
Sure.
What else?
And where vote counts are often manipulated,
Yeah.
people are using their phones to document the tallies.
Creating a record that can be used to challenge any funny business.
It's like a citizen-powered audit.
I love it. What about in the U.S.?
We have the movement for independent redistricting commissions.
Right, those nonpartisan bodies to draw fair voting districts.
It takes the power away from the politicians.
Sounds promising, but I bet there's resistance.
Oh, of course, but several states have done it successfully.
Proof that it can be done.
And the key is public pressure. People need to demand it.
Demand transparency and accountability.
Exactly. And that's what it all boils down to.
Is that?
Informed and engaged citizens are the best defense against rigged elections.
That's a powerful statement.
It is, but it can also be overwhelming.
Where do you even start?
Right. What can we actually do to make a difference?
Well, first, educate yourself.
There's Klass's book, The American History Hit Podcast.
Tons of resources out there.
Websites, organizations, documentaries.
Exactly, and then talk about it.
With your friends, family, colleagues.
Spread the word.
Start a book club, host a movie night, use social media,
Raise awareness and get people engaged.
and then channel that energy into action.
Support those organizations working for electoral integrity.
Advocate for reforms.
Volunteer as poll workers or election observers.
Donate to campaigns that prioritize fair elections.
And contact your elected officials.
Make your voice heard. There are so many ways to get involved.
The key is to find what resonates with you and act on it.
Even small actions can make a difference.
It all adds up,
It's about taking back our power,
not just as voters.
but as citizens who demand a system that reflects our values.
A system that's fair and just for everyone.
That's a vision worth fighting for. But let's be honest, it's easy to feel discouraged when you look at the global picture.
It can feel like an uphill battle.
How do we stay hopeful in the face of such daunting challenges?
That's the million-dollar question.
I know. It's something I've been thinking about a lot.
So how do we stay motivated? How do we keep going?
Well, I think it's important to remember that progress is rarely a straight line.
Oh, definitely not.
There will be setbacks, moments of doubt. But
Look,
history has shown us that the human spirit is resilient.
That's reassuring.
And the desire for freedom, for self-determination, that's powerful.
It is.
And even small acts of courage, they can make a real difference.
So we focus on what we can control.
Exactly. Educate ourselves, connect with others, take action.
And celebrate the victories, even the small ones.
Every step forward is a win.
It's like that saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
Perfect analogy.
We can't change the past, but we can shape the future.
And it starts with recognizing the power we have
Individually and collectively.
to demand a system that truly represents us
To hold those in power accountable.
and to fight for a world where every single vote counts. And you never know, maybe our actions will inspire others to join the fight.
It could create a movement that can't be ignored. That's the beauty of collective action.
It amplifies individual efforts.
And builds a force that's greater than the sum of its parts.
But it all starts with that first step.
The decision to get involved.
To learn, to speak up, to demand better.
And to never, ever give up hope.
Because the future of democracy depends on it.
It really does.
So let's circle back to that feeling of helplessness we talked about at the beginning.
Okay.
This deep dive has really turned it around, hasn't it?
In what way?
It's not about being powerless.
It's about understanding the power we do have.
Going from passive observers
To
active participants.
shaping the future of our democracies.
Exactly. And that brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with.
Okay, I'm listening.
If we can't always rely on governments to protect elections,
Yeah.
what creative ways can we, the citizens, come up with?
To ensure they're fair.
Yes. Maybe it's using technology in new ways.
Like creating those decentralized systems we talked about.
Or developing new educational programs.
To empower voters. Give them the knowledge and tools.
To spot and report fraud.
Precisely.
Or maybe it's as simple as building vigilance within our communities.
Like a neighborhood watch.
But for democracy,
I love that.
we all have a responsibility to safeguard our elections.
It's about thinking outside the box, challenging those assumptions.
And being relentless.
In our pursuit of a world where democracy truly flourishes.
That's a great place to end our deep dive into election rigging.
It exposed some tough realities.
But hopefully it also sparks some inspiration.
To reclaim our power.
And fight for a future where every single vote counts.
Absolutely.
So if you want to learn more, be sure to check out Brian Klass's book
How to Rig an Election.
and the American History Hit podcast episode.
We'll link them in the show notes.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged.
And keep fighting for a better world.
We'll see you next time.
It's funny you mention helplessness, because that's how people feel when they learn about this stuff.
For sure. It feels like you're up against this massive system.
And your actions don't matter.
Exactly.
But that's exactly the point, isn't it?
What do you mean?
The people who benefit from rigged systems want you to feel that way.
They want us to give up.
Exactly.
So we don't even try.
But even small acts of resistance can make a difference.
You really think so?
I do. They have a ripple effect.
Okay, I can see that.
And when they multiply, they create a wave of change.
That's a powerful image.
It is. And we need that collective action.
Especially with gerrymandering in the U.S.
Absolutely.
We talked about how it's legal, but...
But is it ethical?
Right. Can we even do anything about it?
Well, Klass argues for independent redistricting commissions.
Remind me how those work again.
Sure. Instead of politicians drawing the voting maps.
Which is basically letting the fox guard the hen house.
Exactly. You have a nonpartisan group do it instead.
Taking the power away from those who benefit from manipulating the system.
Exactly. And some states have already implemented this.
So we know it can work.
We do.
It seems so obvious. Why isn't everyone doing it?
Well, the politicians who benefit from the current system don't want to change it.
Makes sense, I guess.
It's like asking a magician to reveal their secrets.
Right.
But that's where we, the citizens, come in.
What can we do?
We demand transparency, accountability.
And a commitment to fair elections.
Exactly. We need to make it clear that we won't tolerate a rigged system.
So it's about raising our voices.
It is.
And remember those citizen-powered audits we talked about?
Yes,
We can do that here, too.
absolutely. That same spirit of vigilance.
So it's more than just voting.
It's about being active in the whole process
Holding those in power accountable.
and demanding a system that truly represents the people.
Okay, so we've talked about the problems, some solutions.
Right.
But I think a lot of people are still wondering, what can I actually do?
That's a great question.
How can I make a difference?
Well, as we said before, knowledge is power.
So we need to educate ourselves.
Exactly. Klass's book, The American History Hit Podcast,
All those resources we mentioned.
websites, organizations, documentaries.
So much out there.
And once you have that knowledge, share it.
Talk to people about it.
Friends, family, colleagues.
Host a movie night. Start a book club. Use social media.
Get people talking. Raise awareness.
Then take action.
Support those organizations fighting for fair elections.
Advocate for reforms like those commissions.
Volunteer, donate to campaigns.
Contact your elected officials.
Make your voice heard.
Yeah, there are so many ways to get involved.
And even small actions add up.
So it's about finding what works for you.
And doing it.
It's about reclaiming our power as citizens.
And demanding a system that reflects our values.
Not just about preventing the worst-case scenarios.
It's about creating a culture of transparency.
Accountability.
Where elections are truly free and fair.
Where every vote counts.
And the outcome reflects the will of the people.
That's what we need to be striving for.
It's a vision worth fighting for.
It is, but it's easy to get discouraged.
Especially when you see what's happening globally.
That decline in democracy.
How do we stay hopeful? How do we stay engaged?
It's tough, I know.
Change takes time.
It's not always a smooth path.
There will be setbacks.
Moments of doubt.
But history shows us that the human spirit is strong.
That's good to remember.
And the desire for freedom, for self-determination.
That's powerful.
It is. And even small acts of courage can make a difference.
So we focus on what we can control.
Yes. Educate ourselves, connect with others, take action.
And celebrate the small wins.
Every step forward counts.
It's like that saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
I love that. It's so true.
We can't change the past.
But we can shape the future.
And it starts with recognizing the power we have.
Individually and as a collective.
To demand a system that represents us.
To hold our leaders accountable.
And fight for a world where every vote counts.
And who knows, maybe we'll inspire others.
Spark a movement.
That's the power of collective action.
It amplifies our efforts.
Builds a force for change that's greater than any one of us.
And it starts with that first step.
The decision to get involved.
To learn to speak up, to demand better.
And to never give up hope.
Because the future of democracy depends on it. It's amazing how we've gone from feeling powerless to we can actually do something.
It's about understanding our role.
As citizens, right?
Exactly. We're not just watching from the sidelines.
And that makes me think about those citizen-led initiatives we talked about.
You mean like those audits?
Yeah, and the push for those redistricting commissions.
People are taking action, demanding better.
They're not waiting for the politicians to fix it.
They're creating change themselves.
And that's where I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
If we can't rely on governments to always protect our elections...
Yeah.
What other creative grassroots solutions can we come up with?
That's a good question.
I know it's a big one.
Maybe it's about using technology differently.
Like how?
Well, like you said, those decentralized monitoring systems.
To make it harder to rig the results.
Right. Or what about new educational programs?
For voters.
Yeah, to give them the tools to spot fraud.
So they can report it if they see it.
Exactly. Arm them with knowledge.
Maybe it's about building stronger communities.
Where we all feel responsible for protecting our elections.
Like a neighborhood watch.
But for democracy.
Exactly. We all have a role to play.
We look out for each other, hold those in power accountable.
So if you're listening to this...
And feeling inspired...
Start brainstorming some ideas.
Talk to people, your friends, family.
Your neighbors.
Think outside the box. Don't be afraid to try new things.
Challenge the status quo.
You never know where the best solutions will come from.
So that wraps up our deep dive into election rigging.
We've uncovered some unsettling truths.
But we've also seen the power of hope.
The power of people.
To create a better future.
Where democracy thrives.
And every vote truly counts.
And if you want to explore this further, be sure to check out Brian Klass's book,
How to Rig an Election.
And that American History Hit podcast episode.
We'll link them in the show notes.
The fight for fair elections never ends.
It takes all of us
working together
to protect our democracies.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged,
and keep fighting for a better world.